Hey everyone, and welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen. Launched in March 2020, the Boston-based online radio station Oh Hello Boston has achieved a lot in a short amount of time, and we're damn glad it's here. Station founder Sooz joins me to talk about how it got its start amidst the hardest days of the pandemic. But Oh Hello Boston is far more than music. The station is home to such shows as Decade Stroll, New England Roots Reggae, and On the Town with Mikey D. We look at the different programs and how Sooz came to work with these amazing people. And for this episode, we are taking a little trip back in time because we're going to be talking about some early days in Boston internet radio stations. Joining me is Sooz. She is the founder of Oh Hello Boston, a 2-year-old radio station, and I gotta say, it's definitely one of the best. Sooz, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that we can do this.
Thank you so much. It's great to chat with you, Max. And
Yeah.
thanks for checking out the station.
Of
It's been a fun adventure.
Yeah, and certainly Boston has seen its fair share of different like online stations over the years. Of course, Unregular Radio. A lot of folks know that made the cover of the Phoenix, which is actually framed on my wall. And then, of course, Dig Radio was around for a little bit. WEMF, of course, Boston Free Radio, which comes out of Somerville Cable Access, and now we have this new operation. So I'm curious as to sort of where the idea came from to launch this thing.
Yeah, so a bunch of years ago, the late 90s, online radio was becoming a thing where you didn't need to be a corporate radio station. You could do it yourself. There's a company out of California called Live 365, which was trying to democratize online radio, where like any of us could create a station. And they would you'd stream through them, etc. And I created a station on their platform back in like 1999, and I was tinkering. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm a fan of Boston music, New England bands. And a few years out, while I was tinkering with that, I created an early Boston blog called Exploit Boston, which I know, silly name, but some friends of mine in Seattle had Exploit Seattle, so I created Exploit Boston. And then I changed the radio station from Sooz Radio to Exploit Boston Radio. Did that for a few years, and then there was, internet streaming royalty rates were kind of, up in the air, not really sure what was going to happen. So I stopped doing the station, and that was, 2006 ish. And then fast forward to March of 2020, the pandemic had just happened a few weeks earlier. I was working for a marketing agency in Davis Square at the time. We all went home one day to practice. It's like, okay, can our IT infrastructure handle everybody working from home? It worked, and we just didn't go back because the pandemic was bad enough that literally 24 hours later we were told nobody's going back to the office. So I was at home, I was working from home, I was home all the time, and decided, why not bring back my radio station project? And this time, I was trying to think of like, well, what should I call it? And one of my silly phrases that I've said that I've just used for years is, oh, hello. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's call it Oh Hello Boston. So bought the domain name, started setting things up, and curiously enough, Live 365 actually went bankrupt. They went out of business. They raised a ton of money back when, well, I mean, at that time, late 90s into the early 2000s, the whole internet streaming thing was like, curious. 2017, another streaming company that did more corporate business streaming, they bought Live 365's logo, domain name. Yeah, the logo and the domain name. So when I was looking for a new stream provider, I found Live 365, and I'm like, I know that logo. I know that website. And at the time, I didn't even know that the original Live 365 went out of business. I didn't find that out until after I created my station on what turns out was a new Live 365. And they didn't even have the software from the original. It was literally the domain name and the logo. So they have basically been creating a new online radio platform using the old Live 365's branding essentially. And it's been working fine. So that's, it doesn't have all the things I remember the old Live 365 having, but it's been good. It's been good for like where I'm at right now with the station. It does so they handle my stream, and they handle royalty payments to performance rights organizations. And that was the key reason that I chose them, because I wanted Oh Hello Boston to truly be a legit legal online radio station. So that's my initial rambly tale of how it came to be.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. You definitely do not want to get a call that begins with, I represent the artist so and so, and think, oh boy.
Yeah, and I don't think would have that problem with like regional bands necessarily. I still wanted to do it right. And that's why, I get a lot of questions like, "Oh, why are you how do I download your podcast?" Or, "Oh, your Oh Hello Boston's a show." And I'm like, "No, it's actually like a radio station. We got 24 hours a day to program." And it's I really wanted to create something that could be longer lasting, and I felt like doing it with Live 365 and having the monthly subscription that I pay to them, a good part of it goes towards the pro licensing and reporting. So I've looked into other platforms, other streaming providers, but I would have to do my own reporting. So that's, reporting into CSAC, to BMI, to ASCAP. That is a job. That's a
Yeah.
job just to handle the reporting.
Yeah.
So
No, thank you very
yeah.
much.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so I'm appreciative and grateful that Live 365 has figured out a way to negotiate their contracts with these organizations, and I can pay them some money every month, and they keep things above board.
hmm Now, I just want to dive briefly into like the tech part of this, because I'm sure folks at home are saying, "Hey, I want to do my own station for like local rap artists or punk or what have you." What goes into actually building a station?
Yeah, well, I would say that like Oh Hello Boston, I'm going to answer the question you didn't quite ask, and then I'm going to answer your question. So, Oh Hello Boston is a home for more than just like my station. The station started with rock music because that's just been my world, but I absolutely want to expand to other genres. So if anyone would like to contribute a show that isn't rock, I would love to talk. Um, Ryder McCoy does a reggae show. I never knew much of anything about reggae, and I've learned a lot through his show. So we have the reggae show, and then most of the music is rock music. But as far as like the technical side of it, there isn't really a lot, like there was in the late 90s, like just kind of figuring it out. But so Live 365, the service that I use to run the station, makes it possible for me to not I can run it from my apartment. So I mean, right now, like we're running like everything right now is scheduled. There's scheduled shows. Eventually, we're going to do live shows, but the service I use means I don't need I don't need a room full of like servers and audio gear. I have a decent audio setup, but it's something that I can use at my computer. So that's it's a fairly low barrier to entry, but does require, I think it's more of a financial investment than a techie investment.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. Because, like, I'm sure a lot of folks are thinking, oh, I need to buy some, like, super duper, like, high end, like, desktop with, like a 40, like, terabyte hard drive and blah, 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 blah. So good to know that it's actually a lot easier, because I've definitely seen, especially in the earlier days, people would do their own, like, home stations. And they would play, like, all kinds of, like, folk music or jazz music. And it was kind of cool to see, like, oh, the options change, because as we're seeing more and more terrestrial stations shut their doors, we're seeing more online stations open theirs. Now, as you mentioned, you basically started this because of COVID. Everything was shut down. You had the time. You thought, hey, let's give this thing a go. But I'm curious if just all the limitations of the pandemic impacted the plans you had for the station.
No, no, nothing. I mean, the one reason that I wanted to, one, in addition, because of COVID, a lot of us were, just at home, unless you were an essential worker, people were spending a lot of time at home. And the output of musicians did not slow down during the pandemic. I don't have any data showing like, oh, actually 5 times the number of bands have, created albums during the pandemic, but it certainly didn't slow down. So there was all this new music to add to the station, but you couldn't go out and see that band. So, I feel like Ohlo Boston is an opportunity for artist music to be heard. And we don't, and we play the new stuff, and we go all the way back to 1970. So I've got a show called Decade Stroll. Another silly name for silly name for a project. Decade Stroll is a show that we have. It's time traveling radio style, selecting one song from 1970 to 2021 in sequential 6-song blocks. So that it'll pick a song from the library from 1970 to 1979, then the 80s, then the 90s, then in each decade in the 2000s up to 2021. And so that's been a fun way to kind of show like the depth of music that's coming out of New England. It's mostly rock for that because that's the music that I know, but
Mhm.
you know as we expand on genres, it'll include other songs as well. And then we also play the newer stuff, the past, this year, last year. But we do have an archive of over 100 hours of songs right now, going back to night. Jay Giles band has an album from the night from 1970. So that's the oldest music that we have.
Very cool, very cool. You talk about like the name of the station, but I'm pretty sure like WEMF came about because they were in an old building where the logo was EMF. That's kind of where it came from. I'm pretty sure.
Right, right. Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean,
names are weird. They come from like the name of my show actually comes from a zombie screenplay that I wrote with a buddy of mine that was set in Boston, but we realized we were never going to actually make it because it was just too many like major locations. We were never going to make it. So when I was thinking of a name for the show, he said, "Hey, how about just use the screenplay name? We're never going to make it." I thought, sweet, problem solved.
that, that's awesome. And I was going to ask you where the name came from. So you answered my question.
Exactly.
Mystery solved. Mystery
Exactly.
solved.
Exactly. Everyone knows now the great mystery of why I call this thing Citywide Blackout is unveiled.
I did do some Googling today. I'm like, you know what? I don't know where he got that name. Let me see if I can figure it out. So
I don't
thanks,
really
thanks for that.
I don't really talk about it actually. It doesn't really come up in like conversation. So yeah, it's a very like little known secret, but there we go. There we
Oh,
go.
that's exciting. Well, cheers.
Yeah,
Cheers to this conversation.
exactly.
Learning about Ohalo Boston and the origin story of Citywide Blackout.
Exactly. Now, we talked a bit about some of the shows that you have the Decade Stroll, New England Roots Reggae, but you also have On the Town with Mikey D, which, of course, I think anyone in Boston knows that show. How'd you go about getting that program on?
Yeah, so for the last few years, I've contributed to On the Town with Mikey D. So they're on, they have their weekly show on WMFO 91.5 FM, operated out of Tufts University, their radio station. And that's something that, Mikey D, who was, an amazing Boston music guy, he started 33 years ago, literally 33 years ago this month in May. And, his good friend Joel Simkes kept the show going after Mikey died. And, for years, Joel has been keeping it going. And when the pandemic happened, we were chatting, and I said, "Hey, do you want to air On the Town with Mikey D on Oh Hello Boston if you're not doing it at Tufts?" And he's like, "Oh, they figured out a way to do it to keep it going without people going into the studio." So, but then he said, "Well, why don't I do like a 1 hour version of the show? Because it's 3 hours, the weekly show on WMFO. Like, why don't I do a 1 hour version and then you can air that on Oh Hello Boston?" So we're calling it the Weekend Sampler On the Town with Mikey D. And it's Fridays and Sundays, 5 to 6 p.m. On Fridays, it's the new show that Joel puts together. And then on Sundays, I air a random replay of one of the previous. I think we're up to like 48 shows. He's done it 48 times, so got a lot. And yeah, it's been great to work with Joel and the On the Town crew. I think I mentioned, I guess, when I was first starting to answer your question, I've contributed a little bit to On the Town with Mikey D the last few years. I was doing the concert report for a while, and then more recently I've been taking music from the Oh Hello Boston library and doing like a Boston Wayback Machine. I pick a year and then I go into the Oh Hello Boston archive library, and okay, this week I'm gonna do a show on 1997. or 1998, 2006, and then I create a 20 to 30 minute segment that is part of On the Town with Mikey D's 3 hour show. So we're collaborators. So that's sort of how that came to life.
Very cool. I actually know Joel from back in the day. Well, not I don't like know him, but like we both used to work for the Noise magazine.
Right.
He did, I
Yeah,
think,
he
like interviews and reviews and such. So I just like I just like I recognize the name.
Yeah, Joel is an amazing, well, he's a musician. He can play all kinds of instruments. He's also an amazing, and I know it's using the word amazing, but he is truly like one of the best sound engineers around. So, he runs the Studio D at WMFO that was named after, its name was changed at some point in honor of Mikey D. And so when WMFO, like when On the Town with Mikey D is back in the studio, they have bands that come in. So he's got this amazing archive of like all these bands that he's produced during their radio show. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm a fan. Cheers to Joel.
Yeah, definitely. Cheers to Joel. Really cheers to like I think anyone who is able to help spotlight the artists of New England and Boston. What would you say Oh Hello Boston kind of adds to the city's music scene?
Well, Oh Hello Boston is the only radio station that puts a dedicated spotlight on New England 24 hours a day. We play New England music, and I feel like that has some specialness to it. I mean, some people ask me like, Suze, how do you have a station that only plays New England music? I'm like, well, that's because we have amazing music communities here. A lot of people will go to, when they're young, they'll come out to Boston for Berkeley or any of the number of colleges that are here, and they're incredibly talented musicians, and a lot of them stay and they create roots in Boston. And back before the pandemic, like you could go to the Lizard Lounge on a Tuesday and see rock stars, essentially like people who were at a caliber that you could see them at a huge show. Life is curious, stuff happens, not everyone can rock stars can't always be rock stars, I guess, but it's there's an amazing pool of talent in this region. And I feel like if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have a station that can play New England music 24/7. A lot of what we play is Boston based, but I'm also working to expand it in getting more music from the states surrounding Massachusetts. Like I had a really nice chat with some guys from Vermont the other day, just kind of like boosting the number of like Vermont artists that we play. So working on expanding it beyond Boston too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because a lot of folks, I think, really think of just like Boston's music scene, but it really is all over the place. Like you have some amazing artists up in like Vermont, New Hampshire, Province has such an amazingly eclectic music scene. So it's cool that you're able to kind of broaden the horizons beyond just like that one little spot.
Yeah, I mean the name, I thought about naming the station Oh Hello New England. It just doesn't have the same ring. Like Oh Hello Boston just sounds better. So I try to include that in just like, the descriptions of when you go to the website, you'll see like, oh, like we've been referring to the station as Oh Hello Boston, New England's independent radio station.
That works, yeah. Plus, yeah, like I said, it just doesn't have that like roll of the tongue, you know. Oh, hello, Boston, just flows. Oh, hello, New England. It's a little clunky.
Yeah, I agree. Cheers to that.
Absolutely. Let's talk about libraries because, of course, you have a very, very diverse library of music. How'd you get it all together? How'd you sort of collect this like amazing collection of music?
A big reason that the library goes back, beyond the current last few years is Michelle DePola. She is, longtime music community person. You might know her as Lexi Khan. She used to write for, she wrote for the Noise. She was a part of the Noise for years and years and years when that was, around. And she helped me curate, a lot of music from 1980 into the early 2000s. Like she was a huge help. She was listening to CDs and kind of, picking 2 to 3 songs and helping me like build that first early stage of the library. So without her, we couldn't do Decade Stroll, that show, without her. She was such a big help. So
Nice.
yeah.
How did the two of you meet?
I don't remember. I bet she remembers, but I do not remember. I'm guessing it was at something music related. I know she used to be she was one of the organizers of the Rock and Roll Social. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh
It was, I
yeah.
think it was at the Abbey Lounge for a while. I didn't go back then, but then it was at the Model. So it
Yes.
was like a
Yes.
networking night, like before social media. Like basically because, that was where bands would bring their CDs and bloggers would be there, some local radio show people would be there. I don't think I think I met her before then, but it was probably something at a show. I mean, she used to organize her own shows. She has, it was under the name Low Budget Superhero. So she did stuff at like the Lizard Lounge and other spots around town.
Yeah. Hearing you mention the Rock and Roll Social and the Model, man, that takes me back because like I lived in Boston from 2007 to 2015 roundabouts, and I was pretty much running the show just about the entire time. And it was so cool just to really because I'd never been a part of the scene before then. And it was so cool just to meet the people and see the really vast area it covered too, like all the events and like you said, you would go to these things and be like promoters and producers and radio folks, and people would be handing out their CDs, the business cards. It was such a cool environment to be in.
Yeah, it was very the Rock and Roll Social was very welcoming. I felt, yeah, because I mean, like I'm more or less outgoing, but I also can be very shy. So like, like I used to do a lot of concert photography, and a lot of times bands wouldn't even know I was there. Like I would be there, I'd shoot my photos, I'd put them online like the next soon after, and they were like, "Oh, you were at our show." I'm like, "Yes, indeed I was." But at with the Rock and Roll Social, it was just very, I don't know, I just felt very at ease there. It was very easy to talk to people. Everyone was super approachable. The women who co-hosted it, and I don't remember exactly everyone who was an organizer. I know Michelle was one of them, but they were just they just made it very welcoming. It was a great event.
It
I
really,
think it was
yeah.
on like Monday. I think it was on like Monday
I
nights,
know,
like which
right?
was technically the night that no one had a show. Like back then, it was like no one has a show on Mondays. Let's do our event on Mondays. So yeah,
And that
like a
works.
monthly, one of the first. I don't know which Monday of the month it was, but
Yeah.
yeah, great event.
Yeah, and I can remember like the best part of the week for me was Friday. You get home from work, you ditch the work gear, you get changed, and you're out to a show. You go into like the Middle East or TT the Bears or Sinclair or wherever else. It was such a cool like okay, let's go. We're like off to a show and dive into that scene.
Yeah, one. It's interesting. Like I totally hear you on like the Friday, but for me, boss, for me it was Tuesday,
Oh really?
Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, Tuesdays I'm trying to remember what night Dennis Brennan was doing his residency. I mean, he was doing it up to the pandemic.
Hmm.
Session Americana
Oh yeah.
started at Toad, then they moved it over to Lizard Lounge. I think I saw them like 12 weeks in a row once. Like they were doing like ongoing residencies. So I'll Bull McCabe's in Union Square, Somerville. You could go there every night of the week. Like Ryder, who does our New England Roots Reggae show, he was in a band called Ghetto People Band, and they had a Wednesday night residency that started at 10 p.m. and went until 1 a.m. on a Wednesday. And that was just, I mean, they were amazing. They're great performers. Reggae band, but it's just like every night of the week, like you could go to Sally O'Brien's and see Tim Guerin. You could Sally O'Brien's with Tim Guerin, or Christian McNeil at Atwood's. Like there's just like every day of the week, Boston had amazing shows to see, and it's nice to see that things are starting to get a little better. I went to Atwood's this past weekend for the first time since February of 2020. I had my mask on. I'm still cautious, but it was great. It was so great to be back at Atwood's. Like that
Yeah. Yeah.
that was just, you know,
I was at a place in Providence called Askew a few weeks ago,
oh, askew.
and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and and like you, it was my first time out at an like indoor venue. I've been to a few like a really cool like outdoor shows, but this is my first like indoor back in the day kind of venue, and it was so cool to get back and feel it. It's like everyone's there having a good time, the merch table's set up, and I had thought, okay, this is gonna be a little weird, right? But no, it was just like riding a bike, man. It was so cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, Skew is a great place. I've actually never been there, but like because I was doing the concert report for on the town with Mikey D for a while, I would always, take a look at what they're doing. I haven't been to Providence as much as I would like to. It's like I think I mentioned during our pre-chat, it's a place that I have considered moving to, because they do. I mean, the Silks are from Providence.
Mhm.
They are one of my favorite bands from anywhere. Love them. So yeah, there's a lot of great bands coming out of Providence.
Mhm. Jumping back a bit to the library of music, who would you say are some like the must-have bands, like the ones that absolutely need to have a home on the station?
The bands that I won't let you forget. Like, I think that that's who I want on the station, one in the library. The like what you'll hear on Decade Stroll or other times of the day when there isn't like a set show being played, when it's more like free form through everything. Talking to Animals is one of my favorite bands from the 1990s. They got signed by a major label, and the classic Tale, they got dropped by the major label before the album was officially released. And they ended up getting it released. They had one album, then they split up. Well, fast forward to this year, 2022, and Juliana Nash, the singer and the songwriter from the band, is taking some of the songs that they never released, and she's got a new album coming out next month in June. And I listened to a preview of it, and it was like, it's so interesting to hear music that I remember. Like, two of the songs I absolutely remember from shows, and just so timeless. Like, this is a song that is from the mid 90s, and it just was great to great to see that she's bringing some of the music back. And so we've got a home for her band, Talking to Animals, the music that they released in the 90s, and it's a home for her new music that she's putting out in 2022. There are so many bands that I love. And let's see, there's like Fooled by April, which is like a indie pop band from Boston. Splashdown, they were a favorite band from the 90s who had a similar fate as Talking to Animals. There's Missile Thrush, which was a band from the 90s. So I guess, I moved to Boston from Nebraska in 1994. So for me, like, the years of like music, it started in the mid to late 90s. So that's kind of the music that I definitely want to, include in the station. But also, it's really important to, be current too. So there's just so many great newer artists. Like I mentioned, the Silks. I mean, they've been around since like 2012 maybe, so they're not shiny and new, but there's a lot of good new music coming out too. So I'm actually looking at the library right now just to kind of remind myself of some of the newer artists that we, putting a spotlight on. Salem Wolves,
Mm,
they are an awesome rock and roll band. Ex Hyena, they're like an electronic band duo. Let's see, Jay Prozac, he's out of Worcester. Fatigue, they're a DJ, and they also put out some electronic music. Barboletta is an artist that I hadn't heard of, and she submitted her music to the station because we have a submission page. So
mhm.
if you hear about us and you're an artist, you can submit music on the website. She's out of, I think, Rhode Island, and is more of like a kind of a hip hop R&B artist who's fantastic. So that was like a fun discovery thanks to her reaching out. So we play her music too. Uh, Christian Montgomery and the Winter Kill Band, they're like, country rock.
Fantastic band. They're
Yeah.
like
Oh
among
yeah.
they're the best. I want to
Yeah,
ask
really.
I want to ask about first getting to Boston, 1994. How did you get involved with the scene? Like, what was it like for you to suddenly find this like wealth of music?
Yeah, so in 1993, the fall of 1993, I got on the internet. My college friend said, "Hey, we need to get email accounts." And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Fabulous, let's get email accounts. And so I got an email account, and then I got on Gopher. If you could, that was like pre-web, where you text-based searches on a fax machine, and I found mailing lists for bands, and I found the mailing list for the 10,000 Maniacs because that was a band I liked in the early 90s. And I got to know the person who was running the mailing list, and we became friends. And then I got on a BBS, and I became friends with a bunch of people around my age who were going to school at UMass Amherst and Emerson. So I had this like percolating group of friends who were out here. And I ended up coming out for the summer of 1994, subletting one of their rooms because they were going to be traveling abroad for the summer, and I never left. So I left after I came out from Nebraska after my junior year of college, essentially I dropped out. I never finished my degree. The following year I started to get into tech, and and on the note of tech, a lot of musicians also work in tech. So I had coworkers who were in bands. So that, was one way that I learned about music here too. And then just, I love music, and I was starting to get into photography. So my camera was a way for me to have a role at a show, do something so that's basically how, I got in with learned more about the music scene in Boston.
Nice, nice. I actually got started in radio because of a trip I took to the Philippines. End of story. I won't elaborate.
I believe there's a link on your blog. Is it
Damn.
Blogspot or
Yep.
Blogger? Yeah, I almost clicked on it, but I didn't yet.
Click
So
on it.
now I will. I think
Yes.
it's like was it a photo album? Something.
It's
Photo?
a
No.
it's like a journal I kept. Well, see,
Okay.
two secrets are out here: how I got started and how the name comes from. Unveiling
Nice.
all the
Excellent.
secrets.
That's awesome.
Exactly. I want to ask about the Boston scene as it is now. Of course, things are kind of coming back. We're seeing places reopen. Bands are doing shows more regularly. Does the vibe feel like it's back to what it was pre-COVID?
Well, I know that when I've been to a few shows this year, not a lot, but a few, and being at Atwood's this past weekend, definitely it felt like a reunion. It was, the first time I saw a lot of people. It was, really, it was interesting to like reconnect with people. There's been some sad news recently. David Mirabella of the Rationales died a couple weeks ago, and he was we were we were good friends, and I have a lot of acquaintances in the music scene. Not and most, I see them at shows, but David was someone that I would text, that we would, make plans to see each other. And that show at Atwoods was also kind of an opportunity for, a lot of us to just talk about, oh, I miss Dave, and just kind of share that memory and that experience together. But yeah, I think, I am personally cautious because COVID hasn't gone away, and it I don't know when that will happen. So I'm continuing to wear my mask, but trying to go out and see music when I can. It's nothing like it was pre-COVID, but there's hope. There's hope. And there's new venues too. Like it's not just that everything shut down. Like Crystal Ballroom in Davis Square, Somerville has an amazing 500 capacity venue. It is so lovely there. And I actually went to a show there in February, and everyone was masked and everyone's vax cards were checked. So there was like a bit of ease of entering the space, because I knew everyone had been vaccinated. Everyone was wearing their masks, and we could be together even during a still kind of curious time. So, but yeah, like Crystal Ballroom's new, Roadrunner, which is a much bigger venue, that's new in Brighton. Trying to think of the other. I feel like there's like more newer ones.
Yeah, there's a
The
couple.
Jungle, the Jungle has persisted, which is very, very good. I'm glad to see that they have persisted. So yeah, so I think they're the small to middle size venues. There's a bit of a hole with that right now.
Yeah, yeah. But what I've seen though with the scene of Boston is that it always comes back, you know. We may lose a place, but we'll get another one. So like I think there's that hunger and that desire for that scene to be active. So yes, we did lose Great Scott, but last I heard, this could have changed. I could be totally off base, but they were looking at a new location.
Yeah, the Pizzeria Regina thing is actually going to now be a restaurant.
Damn
A
it.
restaurant. Yeah, like I think the last week or two, that was announced that it's no longer going to be the new Great Scott. Maybe
Larg.
they'll. I haven't heard if they've found another potential home.
They probably
Um,
will. You know,
but
like I
but
said.
the other thing that's been curious is that breweries are turning into music venues,
Yeah.
and which is kind of amazing. But that's been I mean, like Aeronaut Cannery in Everett, they have an amazing stage there. It's huge. I mean, the audio, like the room, not room audio, but like the acoustics are a little funky there. But that's been an interesting place to see bands. Like I saw the Silks there a few months back.
Hmm.
So that, and there are other breweries too that are doing shows that are not as big as like the Aeronaut Cannery space, and that's been nice to see. It's different, but you gotta figure things out and be creative, and I think breweries have kind of helped fill that gap a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How do you stay on top of the music scene, especially where the days of us having magazines like we had the Noise back in the day. Of course, we had the Phoenix. Some of these are gone. So how do you stay on top of like who's releasing new content?
Yeah, well, we do have a submissions page on our website. So ohloboston.com, click the submit button. And a lot of artists are using that to share music with us. Um, Social media is really the place where I stay on the pulse of things. Everybody's, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. On Twitter, we've got a list called New England Musicians. So if a New England artist follows us, whether we play their music yet or not, I'll add them to that Twitter list. And then when I want to read their posts, their Twitter posts, I can just go to that list, see the latest. And that's been a great way to kind of see like what's happening, Facebook pages, in Instagram, also Instagram. So social media has definitely helped me because I'm not going out to shows like I was and seeing people in person. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. I think you definitely gotta look for those like alternative means of doing that because like you, I also don't go out to a whole lot of shows anymore. So for me, social media is probably the best way for me to stay on top of it. But I mean, we are also seeing other publications. Of course, Vanyaland, definitely one of the best of the best. Worcester Magazine, they really stay on top of the music scene as well. So we do have some publications still around, but
oh,
fewer than
that,
back in the day.
that's true. Yeah, Vanyaland's awesome. And yeah, and Victor at Worcester Magazine, he's been great at putting a spotlight on artists. Like I really enjoy reading what he writes too.
So on top of things. As I mentioned earlier, we have seen a number of different online stations. What does that tell you about just the like entrepreneurial spirit around the city's music scene?
Yeah, I mean those stations, they have a legacy. I would love I have thought about, could I potentially pitch Oh Hello Boston to some of them as like a new home of sorts for some of their shows. I think I am doing Oh Hello Boston right now as a labor of love. So that also makes it possible to do it. I'm not, I don't have an office where I'm running things. I don't have staff. Like the contributors, we're all doing this as a labor of love. Now, would I like to get to a point where there's sponsors and there's revenue? 100%. But right now, it truly is a labor of love. So that's how I'm able to do it. That of course can't sustain itself because I don't, can't be an expensive hobby forever. But that's kind of how I started it. That's how I started the station as a labor of love.
Hmm.
And
Oh.
I think that starting small and then going from there.
Now, recently, you got yourself featured in the Globe, which is no small accomplishment, certainly. What do you think that adds just to the presence of Oh Hello Boston?
Yeah, well, being written about by the paper of record in Boston was very exciting. And James Sullivan is legit. Like he's been writing for years, and we had a nice chat about how his history in Boston music. Like he saw shows at the Channel back in the day. So he has roots in Boston music. So for to have him write the story for the Globe about the station, it I'm very grateful that he wrote, that he was signed up to tell the story. I really appreciated that.
Hmm.
And the dig is also written about us, which was also awesome. And Worcester Magazine, Victor included it in a blog post he wrote. So we've got a few things that have started to percolate. In large part thanks to Michael Murat at Publicist, who engaged with to help with PR outreach.
Hmm. Definitely, definitely. So definitely still a really, I would say, a wealth of journalists out there helping to kind of spread the news about the city's music scene.
Yeah, and they're you. I mean, not that I'm turning this into like a commercial about you, but you are part of that. Like you are, Max, you citywide blackout is important. Like you've kept this going. So
Yeah,
cheers to you for that.
there you go. So what is down the road for Oh Hello Boston? What plans do you have that you're working on?
Yeah, so right now the station is 100% commercial free. I did that intentionally because I like with Live 365, the platform that I stream through, you can they actually have an advertising system where I could I could drop in ads and there's like a revenue share with them. But I chose, but they're like generic ads. They're not like, and I want Oh Hello Boston's sponsorship to be hyper local as much as possible. So I'm going to start, I'm going to start working on like sponsorship campaign. We've got a new online store that is launching in a few days where you can buy Oh Hello Boston merch. To start, it's going to be our logo, which was designed by musician and designer Erin Gennett, and she's in a band called Thrust Club, and she's awesome. And she designed our logo, so we're going to use that for the initial store launch. And then I'm talking to a musician who's also a designer about creating some new designs to also sell in the merch store, not just with things other than just our logo. So yeah, so sponsorships. We've got the online store. I've started using SMS for text messages, so listeners can text us and connect with us through text messages. So that's something that's in progress.
Mhm.
But yeah, this I'd say this the sponsorships is the thing that I'm really, working towards next.
Couple more questions. We have seen a number of terrestrial stations close their doors. These were stations who were very strongly involved in the local scene. Do you feel like there's almost a responsibility for people to keep that going so that, that presence can remain for years to come?
Boston deserves a radio station, and especially a radio station who focuses on just music that's released in this region. And when I say Boston deserves a radio station, really I mean New England, because we're playing music beyond Boston. But yeah, I mean I think it's important, and one thing that with like the player that we have on the station when you're listening, over in the right corner there's a little shopping cart icon which connects to if the band has their music available for sale in Apple Music, you can click that icon and you can buy it. I feel it's important to buy music. It's great. I know that people talk about, oh, you can get on Spotify and you can get exposure. You may only make 12 cents, but you get exposure and all, and that sure, I guess, be on Spotify, but it's still important to buy music, especially right now when you can't go to a show and buy the merch. So, when you're listening to Oh Hello Boston and you hear something that you like that sounds interesting, not everyone's on Apple Music, but most bands are.
Hmm.
And, especially current bands. So that's a way to support your ears and the artists, because I don't believe in the just support local music. It's not a charity. Like artists are giving us something. It is a gift. So I feel like there's value in, buying the album.
Hmm.
You know, Bandcamp is one of my favorite sites to buy music. So
Ah, yeah. All right. So we recently passed the 2-year anniversary of Oh Hello Boston. Does it surprise you that this has become what it is in that short amount of time?
I'm keeping it going because I'm persistent. I'm stubborn. I don't know. I really want this. I feel like it's my contribution to put this out there and provide a platform for artists to be heard. It's just a matter of getting the word out. So in addition to sponsorships, well, I feel like sponsorships will tie into like further promotion, because someone needs to know we exist before they can appreciate how much they enjoy it,
Hmm.
that they would enjoy it. So
Hmm.
being able to connect with like you on your podcast and get that Globe article, it's really it really helps a lot.
Hmm. All right. Well, Suze, thank you so much for joining me. I am so psyched to know that Oh Hello Boston's out there, and happy 2-year anniversary and many, many more to come.
Thank you so much.
You're
Cheers to the continued awesomeness of Citywide Blackout.
Thank you. And folks, don't forget, go to that's OH HelloBoston.com. put the music on in the background on while you're at work, on while you're driving. Certainly follow their socials. You're going to see so many cool posts about so many amazing artists. And looking forward to talking again for year 3, 4, 5, and 20.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Max.
Hi, this is singer Kate Eppers, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout.
Okay, everyone, that brings this episode to a close. And be sure to check out Oh Hello Boston at ohhelloboston.com. You can follow this show on Facebook under Citywide Blackout and Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. Get at me at citywidemax@yahoo.com and check out the show wherever you find your podcasts, as well as every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. As always, keep those ears open.